Akai MPK Mini Mark III. Should you buy it? Are the pads any good? Do the endless knobs never really end? Can you use the joystick to play asteroids? Can you watch movies on the LCD screen? Let's find out. But before we start, I would like to ask you to subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. YouTube has this policy that I need to have at least 1000 subs to get any kind of compensation for my videos, and as you can see, I'm missing a few, so you'll be actually doing me a big favor. Okay, with that out of the way, let's start. First of all, this thing is really beautiful. I mean, just look at it. Sleek, shiny, black, red and white, those round knobs and a sweet little joystick. I mean, it looks like a candy. If somebody wanted a MIDI controller wedding cake, they can just buy this beauty and bam, done. Now, apart from being pretty, it's also solid. The keys aren't wobbly, the knobs are tight, and the only thing I'm worried about is this little guy over here. I think the joystick is the only reason to buy a travel case, and there are some dedicated travel cases on Amazon, so you may want to grab one before throwing your MPK Mini into the check-in luggage. I mean, if we have airlines again one day. As for cabin luggage, it fits nicely into a standard backpack, unlike my Korg Microkey. So with MPK Mini you get 25 keys, 8 pads, 8 knobs, an XY controller, also known as a joystick, a built-in arpeggiator, and some software licenses. Oh yeah, and a tiny LCD screen over here. Unless you're an ant, then it's like a cinema. Oh man, I miss movies. I hope we will have movies again one day. Now let's start with the stuff I like the most, pads. They are absolutely brilliant. You have to hit them pretty hard for the full volume, but that's what the full level button is for. And that's what actually gives them a lot of dynamics. They are not squishy, like on some cheaper controllers, and they light up when you hit them. Not very useful, but a nice touch and looks really cool when you are in a dark gig. I mean, if we will have gigs again one day. Now, as for drumming, you can easily do stuff like 16-beat, and even lazy people can lay down a trap hi-hat with a note repeat button. Now, some people were complaining about the MPK not syncing the note repeat and arpeggiator tempo to your DAW project, but I never had this problem, and actually there's a setting for that in the MPK settings editor, so maybe it's just a question of changing that one to external. Now, some other people will say that you don't really need pads because you can program drums with your keys. And I mostly agree. It's doable for drums, but not for stuff like congas. It's a completely different feel. You may also say that 8 pads is not enough, but that's why you get the bank switch feature. You can map 8 pads in each bank and switch between banks with this button. It can also work as a traffic light if you're an ant. Now, if you press the CC button, pads can send CC signals that allow you to control stuff. And by stuff, I mean basically everything. Everybody is talking about using pads to play samples. Oh, how did that get there? Doesn't matter. But you can also use them to control effects. For example, you can turn on a lo-fi filter on the drum loop. Or a chopper in a synth. It's way more convenient for quick on-off stuff than using the knobs, but it takes some effort to set it up. Another cool thing you can do is to turn on the note repeat, switch to a bass synth, and then just press the pad. Now you can control the volume by pressing harder or softer. Again, not very useful, but it feels really cool, and I mean really cool. Oh yeah, and the LCD shows you how hard you are pressing it. Actually, I think this could make a very interesting gaming controller. So yeah, the pads are great, I totally recommend 10 out of 10. Second favorite feature, knobs. Now this is a great change from Mark II. They have not only changed the way the knobs look, but now they are endless. Which means that instead of getting just 360 degrees per knob, you get infinity, and that's like infinite return per knob. And there are 8 of them. But seriously, while infinite knobs are better, in my honest opinion, it's actually a question of choosing your poison. Finite knobs suck because they don't follow the parameter level, and often they blow up in your face when you just want to push the volume up a notch. And infinite knobs don't give you any kind of idea about the current value of the parameter. I mean, is it 1? Is it 11? MPK has the tiny LCD screen that will show you the value, but, like in quantum physics, only once you change it. And so the Schrödinger's cat lives on. Or maybe not. There are some better solutions like motorized knobs or fancy indicators, but they are way too expensive for an entry-level gadget like this one. Still, the knobs are really good, they can control most parameters in your DAW and they work flawlessly, 10 out of 10. Okay, so now the keys. First of all, you get only 2 octaves, so You will not get wild here. But hey, that's what you signed up for. You have the octave up and down button if you need more, but 2 octaves should be enough for anybody, as Bill Gates once said. According to Akai, they have completely redesigned the keyboard for Mark III, and well, I guess it's okay. I mean, it's totally a matter of taste, but for example, for me, my Korg Microkeys completely blows the MPK out of the water. I mean, this feels springy, and this feels spongy. I like spongy better. Basically, it takes more force to get full velocity out of the MPK. Still, there is a lot of dynamics and it's much better than most mini key controllers, but I just can't stop comparing it to my Korg Microkeys. On the other hand, they cost about the same, so Korg had much more money to spend on the keyboard. Next up, the XY controller, aka pitch modulation, aka the joystick. My 2 cents, it works great for the pitch, but it sucks for modulation. Modulation should not snap back to center. Fortunately, in most virtual instruments you can just reassign the modulation to one of the knobs, and that pretty much solves the problem, so it's not a showstopper. Okay, so now Arpeggiator. I don't think I'll ever use it, but it's there. So you can just turn it on, and if you press latch with the Arpeggiator on-off button, it just keeps on going and going and going. You can change the measure, octaves, direction, and of course my favorite is 30-second notes with random order and 4 octaves. Basically it's like a talkative version of R2-D2. There have been some complaints that with no MIDI output you can't really use the Arpeggiator to control external hardware and MIDI instruments, but first of all, that's a problem that a $10 USB MIDI dongle will solve, and second of all, as I said, I don't think I will ever use the Arpeggiator. And the last keyboard related feature, sustain pedal. Yep, despite having just 2 octaves, this thing has a sustain pedal input. Now, unfortunately, I don't own a sustain pedal, but hey, we can build one using our do-it-yourself powers. We will need a busted guitar cable, 2 pieces of wood, an old hinge, a sponge, not a corporate owned cartoon character, and some duct tape. Okay, now that was fun. And the cool thing about sustain pedal is that you can also use it to control stuff. So what's the verdict for keys? Yeah, it's pretty decent, I would say. It's about 7 out of 10. So that's it for hardware. Now let's move to software. And this is where, well, let's just say that there's a lot of room for improvement here. First of all, installation is quite tricky. For the basic stuff, you need to sign up with Akai to install their software manager software, give them the serial number, and that's it. And for VSTi plugins that you get with your MPK, you will need to create an iLok account, install iLok, and jump through a couple of burning hoops while juggling rabbit gators to get it to work, but it's doable. And somebody actually posted a walkthrough video for that on YouTube. So what do you get when you install everything? Well, first of all, you get MPK Mini Editor. It's a tool for managing your MPK Mini settings, and it's really great. You can edit pretty much everything, set the clock source, and save your settings as program. You have 8 slots to save your programs, and later on you can switch between them using the Program Select button. Besides the editor, you also get 3 VSTi instruments. Hybrid 3. Pretty much a standard synth with 3 oscillators, a sequencer, and some effects. It's okay, but it's definitely not in the same league as Retrolock or Serum. Velvet. Basically, Rhodes. Now, I have 3 plugins for Rhodes in my library, and this is my least favorite one, but I would say it's okay-ish. Next, Minigrand. Actually, I really like this one. It sounds okay, it feels nice, but for some reason, I guess they wanted to make you feel like you are playing a real piano, they made it so that the low keys are in the left channel and the high keys are in the right. And you can't turn that feature off. I mean, sometimes I wonder if software companies have like a dedicated team of engineers coming up with annoying mandatory features. Now you might have noticed that while this thing has a great set of pads, there's no drum instrument. You get the MPC Beats though, which has a sample player and a few sample packs instead. Well, technically MPC Beats is completely free, so maybe get is not the most precise legal term here. And what can I say about MPC Beats? Well, it exists, it's a bit messy when it comes to user experience, and it supports VSTi plugins, so you can load up your favorite instruments and effects. I'm sorry that I will not go into too many details here, but if you are watching this video, most probably you already own a license for FL Studio, Reaper, Logic, Ableton, Cubase or GarageBand, and any of those, maybe except GarageBand, will beat MPC Beats. Yeah, that's right, they will beat MPC Beats. Now, one really funny thing though about MPC Beats is that besides being a VSTi host, it is also a VSTi instrument. And this is some totally badass next level exhibit inception shift. You can load your MPC Beats into Cubase and then load another VSTi instrument into your MPC Beats that are in your Cubase. Why would you do that? I have no idea, but that doesn't make it uncool. And finally, let's talk about workflow control. I'm using Cubase so I can map the knobs to faders in my mixer, and that's pretty much it. But I've heard the integration with FL Studio is really good, and for Ableton, if improving workflow is your goal, most probably Novation is a golden standard. So, final thoughts. It's really good, especially considering the price. I love the pads and I actually love the joystick when it comes to pitchbends, but it sucks for modulation, so it's kind of balanced. The knobs are great, the keys are pretty good, but there's a lot of minor details that could be improved, like what's displayed in the screen. For example, when you hit a pad, you see a note number, but why would you display 42 instead of A#3? I mean, it's so easy to fix. And there are more details like this. For example, I'd love it if the full level key also worked for the keyboard. It's also fixable with a software patch, so maybe we'll get those things and more in a firmware update. So, should you buy it? Well, if you are not an Ableton user and you want to get just one small device to rule them all, especially the pads, it's a no-brainer, just get it. If you are using Ableton, I would seriously consider Novation Launchkey Mini. It's very similar to MPK Mini, and while I don't like the pads on that one as much as I love ones on MPK, there are 16 of them. They have colors and they integrate with Ableton nicely. Now you might also want to take a look into other options if you are mostly interested in the keyboard. As I said, Korg Microkey, at least in my opinion, is much better in that department, but it doesn't have pads or knobs. But you can get those with Akai LPD8. So you can get a 2 or 3 octave Korg Microkey and an LPD8. It will not be as tossable and as handy as an MPK, and it will also be a lot uglier. Also, the LPD8 did not get updated with the screen and endless knobs, and I'm not sure if it ever will. So it's a tough call, but basically I think as long as you don't need 3 octaves, you should stick to MPK Mini. And lastly, should you consider upgrading to MPK Mini Mark III if you have the previous version? I think that purely depends on your budget. If you are okay with paying $100 for the endless knobs, LCD and slightly better overall looks, yeah, why not? So that's it for today. As always, if you like this video, hit the like button and also share, subscribe and so on. And first of all, stay safe. Peace.